أشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم اليوم أكملت لكم دينكم وأتممت عليكم نعمتي ورديت لكم الإسلام دينا صدق الله العلي العظيم وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين. I have read a well-known verse of the Quran that I translate as follows. At this time, I present to you the perfected form for your personality development. I also extend to you all good things beyond which there is no need for anything external. And I am happy to give you Islam as the result of your efforts. Normally, this verse of the Quran is understood in the context of the perfection of religion, and that Muslims believe, or supposed to believe, that religion became perfected. And this is the verse of the Quran that they use. But I have come to the conclusion that Muslims don't accept that Islam was perfected during the time of the Prophet Muhammad. And the reason why I have come to that conclusion is because, in actual fact, whenever you ask Muslim questions about Islam, they do not, or they hardly refer to the Quran. They go to the Hadith or they go to Sharia, what the scholars say. In other words, therefore, many Muslims, perhaps most Muslims, believe or do not accept that Islam was perfected during the time of the Prophet Muhammad, but it was perfected only after about 100 years when Hadith became compiled. And later on, even that Hadith has to be interpreted by the scholars, the different schools of thought, the different Imams throughout the ages. So that nowadays, when you ask people to explain certain points of the Quran or certain issues in life, in most cases they will go to the Hadith or they will go to this is what the scholar says, or this the majority of scholars say this or that or the other. Some famous names of persons who do this are, for example, Zakir Naik and Yusuf Qadi. Both of them do not give opinions on their own, especially if it is controversial. They go back and support their arguments by what the scholars say, or what Sharia says, or what the Hadith says. Very rare will they quote something from the Quran. Now, most of these scholars give valuable opinions. Imam Abu Hanifa, Shafi, Malik, and a host of other saints and important personalities of Islam give some very important interpretations of the Quran and explain certain things on Islamic knowledge. But majority of them, many of them, are not spokespersons of Allah. They give their ideas from the research that they have done, but they do not say that this is what Allah has told me and explained to me in interpreting the Quran. However, Mirza Ghulam Ahmad, the Mujaddid of the 14th century, and other Mujaddids as well, throughout the ages, for in every 100 years Allah raised Mujaddids to explain the Quran, they interpret the Quran based upon revelations from Allah. They received divine revelation. Allah guided them as to how to interpret the Quran. Take, for example, the scholars of Islam have read in the Hadith that Jesus Christ is going to return. Based upon the Hadith, they have reinterpreted the Quran and said that if the Hadith says that Jesus is going to come back, it means the Quran has to support this. And so they believe that Allah raised Jesus alive into heaven, which is a preposterous idea. It is against the teachings of the Quran, because the Quran itself says that Jesus Christ will pay zakat and keep up prayer as long as he lived. If Jesus Christ is living in heaven, is alive in heaven, or somewhere outside of this earth, where is he praying? Where is he getting the means to pay his zakat? So that there are other issues about Jesus Christ being alive in a locality outside of this earth, therefore. What Mirza Ghulam Ahmad did is he looked at the Quran. He was guided by Allah to interpret the Quran that Jesus Christ is dead and will not return to this world. And he says, you, your children, and generations after will wait for the coming of Jesus Christ, and you will never see him because he's not coming back. Therefore, the hadith has to be reinterpreted. Rather than the Quran be reinterpreted in the light of the hadith, it's the other way around. The hadith has to be reinterpreted in the light of the Quran, and so he reinterpreted the hadith to show that the Jesus Christ who is going to return is not the Jesus Christ, the Jesus of Nazareth, the prophet of God, but someone else who will come in the spirit and likeness of Jesus. And he says, Allah has told me, I am that person. Now, one of the important things about the coming of Mujaddids is that it is not merely that the hadith says that Allah will send at the head of every century. The Prophet Muhammad, whenever he gave certain interpretations and explanations, they were always based upon the messages of the Quran. And remember, the Quran has verses which are clear-cut, and there are verses which are interpretable. And so the Quran indicates to us that it is only Islam that promises its followers a certain ni'mah. A ni'mah means freshness or blessing after distress. So in every religion, you find that after a while, the religion does not have the effect for which it was presented to people. They have watered down religion, they have reinterpreted religion, they have changed it, they have altered their text, they have altered the interpretation. And so religion has lost its impact in performing the function for which it has been given to human beings by Allah. And so when Allah sent the Quran and the Prophet Muhammad, he ensured two things. First of all, that the Quran is perfected and no one will be able to change its words. And secondly, even though they cannot change the words, they can change the way in which they apply the Quran to their lives, and that can be incorrect. So Allah promises that He will give His favors. He will, whenever believers will go into distress, whenever they will fail to follow the teachings of the Quran, He will in fact send people and give them the guidance so that they can bring back the freshness of the beauty of Islam. So that when Muslims moved away from the original intent of religion, Mujaddids come, not to change the religion, but to change the people and their mindset. It is to change the Muslims' outlook of religion, how you view religion, what is the purpose of religion. And the Mujaddids do this by presenting evidence that Allah speaks, that Allah is a living God, that Allah is a being that still cares for His religion and His people, and if they misinterpret it and if they misapply it, He guards this religion by sending people who are His spokesmen, who speak from Him to show you how to interpret the religion of Islam and the teachings of the Quran. So if Islam is like other faith systems, only relating historical incidents of Allah speaking in the past, as you find in other scriptures, and if Islam is like other faith systems that gives no promise of Allah's continued speaking to human beings, then it is in the same category as other faith systems. For example, you find it in the time of Abraham. Abraham said to his father, he addressed his father thus, "Why do you worship that which does not hear, see, or enrich you?" And Moses also said to Samiri, the Quran says, that you worship gods that don't speak to you or guide you. They don't speak or guide. In other words, what the Quran is pointing out to us is Allah is a being that hears, that enriches, that sees, and that guides us, and He also speaks to us. If God does not speak to us, then He is a dead God. And the Quran says, no, Allah is a living being. Now, there are some people who think that when Allah speaks, it makes a person a prophet. That is not so. All of Allah's speech to human beings are not only to prophets. The Quran is quite clear on this. Allah spoke to the mother of Jesus, He spoke to the mother of Moses, and He spoke to others as well. He gave revelation to the disciples of Jesus. So the Quran is quite clear on this issue that you don't have to be a prophet for Allah to be speaking to you. So on the other hand, there are some people who think that once Allah speaks to you as a prophet, it is those prophets are law-bearing prophets, and they make a distinction between law-bearing and non-law-bearing. Now, it's important to note that prophetic revelation to prophets do not always contain laws or Sharia. It contains other guidance as well. For example, the first revelation of the Prophet Muhammad contained no religious law, and yet still there are some members of the Ahmadiyya movement who are known as Qadianis. They believe that all prophetic revelation a revelation with a law, a Sharia. Although the Quran says for every prophet we have given a Sharia, we have given a Shira, the law, and a minhaj, regulations, how to interpret that law. But then we have to understand and appreciate that the fact that the Prophet Muhammad is the last prophet and no prophet will come after him, it does not really mean that Allah has ceased speaking to human beings. And the Quran supports this idea. We may, for example, for a moment, look at the fact that while Muslims are quarreling over which land to own, which government to put into power, which sect to follow, which cause to support, whether Gaza, Palestine, Ukraine, Pakistan, Iran, the Arabs, who to condemn among the Christians, among Hindus, among Jews, and even among other Muslims. They are constantly hating and calling this one a kafir or disbeliever or so. And while Muslims are doing all that, they are disunited, they are in so much confusion about which is the correct Islam to follow. The Lahore Ahmadiyya Anjuman and its members, the member Ahmadis, are given to the world an Islam that is the truth about Allah, the truth about His book, the truth about His Prophet Muhammad, that Allah is a living being, that His book is the perfect book, the perfect scripture, and that His Prophet, the Prophet Muhammad, is the final prophet. No Jesus Christ, no other prophet is going to come after him. But the Quran indicates to us and tells us that the ni'mat of Allah, the favors or the blessings, or ni'mat really means also freshness. When you are in distress and you get a new idea and a new outlook, and a new verve, a new fillip to move forward, that is what ni'mah means, a sudden surge of good things. So the ni'mat of Allah is prayed for in the first chapter of the Quran, when we all every day, every time say Sirat al-Ladina an'amta alayhim. That is, oh Allah, give us, lead us along the path in which there is always freshness, that of those who have always been given fresh ideas and concepts, so they'll be able to apply it in their lives and for the benefit of themselves as well as the community and society. But the Quran goes on to explain this further. It also says that whoever sticks to Allah's attributes, for the purpose of religion is self-development, to develop ourselves based upon the attributes of Allah. We cannot build ourselves morally and spiritually and in relation to one another without the attributes of Allah. The attributes of love and forgiveness and kindness and patience, these are not material things. And that is why Mirza Ghulam Ahmad says, place religion above the world. that is above material things, religious values, morality, spirituality, kindness, charity, truthfulness, justice. These are not things that are tangible. They are not found. You cannot buy them. You cannot inject them into an individual. But they are the attributes of the living Creator, Allah. So the Quran points out to us that whoever sticks to Allah's attributes and the Messenger, they are with those upon whom Allah has bestowed favors from among the prophets and the truthful and the faithful and the righteous, and a goodly company they are. Now the word with that I have emphasized here in Arabic is ma'a, and it's important to understand the meaning of this word, because the other section of the Ahmadiyya movement, the Qadianis, and their Khalifa gloat over this verse to make their claim that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad was a kind of prophet, a non-law-bearing prophet, they said. And the reason they interpret this verse in this way is that because the word prophets are used here, that those who they are with those upon whom Allah has bestowed favors from among the prophets and the truthful and the faithful and the righteous. And they said, well, Muslims can become truthful and faithful and righteous, so why can't they become prophets? Although their belief is that in 1300 years, only one person became a prophet, that is Mirza Ghulam Ahmad. This verse should have been applicable to all the centuries, but they don't believe that. They believe it is only one person who came as a non-law-bearing prophet, so they claim. But the Quran is quite clear that of all these four categories of prophet, truthful, faithful, and righteous, only one, that is prophets, it explains that Muhammad is the Khatamun Nabiyyin. He's the finality of prophets. He's the seal of prophets. So while you can become truthful and faithful and righteous, you cannot become a prophet, because Muhammad is the final prophet. And you can only consider yourself to be a spiritual replica of the Prophet Muhammad. In that sense, you can become metaphorically a prophet, but not in the real sense. And this is how the Lahore Ahmadiyya movement and Mirza Ghulam Ahmad himself has explained that the Qadianis are wrong when they say that you can become a prophet, because prophethood is sealed with the coming of the Prophet Muhammad. And the word ma'a does not mean to become a prophet or to become a righteous or to become a truthful or to become a faithful. There's a well-known statement of the Quran that says, Inna Allaha ma'ana. Allah is with us. The same word with is used here, the same word ma'a is used here. It does not mean that Allah becomes one of us or becomes human. That is contrary to the teachings of the Quran. So the use of the word ma'a does not mean that you become a prophet or a truthful, or it means that you are in their company. Inna Allaha ma'ana means Allah is with us. He is side by side with us. He guides us. So indeed, the Quran points out to us further that Allah bestowed a benefit on the believers when He raised among them a messenger from among themselves, reciting to them His messengers and purifying them and teaching them the book and the wisdom, although before that they were surely in manifest error. Now it's important to note here, and Mirza Ghulam Ahmad has explained this quite clearly in his book Ikhalti Kaizala. He corrected that misunderstanding, that error, that people think that he's a prophet, and he says there's a distinction between messengers and prophets. All prophets are messengers, but all messengers are not prophets. The Quran is quite clear of that. We know of angels as being as messengers, but not prophets. And the Quran also points out to us that Allah speaks to people. He raises messengers and gives them knowledge of the unseen, which means that people who are not prophets can be messengers, and they are given knowledge of the unseen, which is the role of the mujaddids. So when the Quran says He has bestowed a benefit on believers by raising among them messengers, and there are several places of the Quran that constantly say that the messengers among you, wa fikum rasul, and among you is His messenger, a messenger. there are always messengers around us in that people receive divine revelation. Many saints, mujaddids, scholars in Islam receive divine revelation. That's why I said the opinions are very valuable, because they have obtained knowledge from Allah, some more than others. But the fact is, the Quran is the only book that tells us that Allah continues to speak to us and explain to us what His intent is in giving us religion, all religions, and giving us the Quran especially. In fact, the Quran says Allah is always sending messengers. He is not always sending prophets, because prophethood has come to an end. Muhammad is the last prophet. So that Mirza Ghulam Ahmad says, yes, Allah has revealed to me, given me certain revelations, and other mujaddids have made that, or other Muslims have testified to the fact that they have received divine revelation. So when the Quran points out to us that the mujaddids do come, and they come as messengers, not as prophets, and what is their role? They recite the messages of Allah. They purify people. They remove from them the wrong ideas and concepts they have about religion, so that that knowledge can purify them and make them excellent human beings. And He teaches them, the book gives them the understanding of how you can understand the Quran rather than having to rely on the scholars and the hadith and so on, because many of these things came much later on, and give them wisdom and knowledge so that they can use that information wisely to be able to restrain themselves in the doing of evil and to propel themselves in the doing of good. And the Quran says, although before that they were surely in manifest error. So the Quran is a book that it teaches us that whenever we are in error, either as individuals or as a community or society, we have the ability to refresh ourselves with knowledge from Allah. And we understand that by the way in which the mujaddids come and present the teachings of Islam and help us to understand the Quran. So that when Muslims say that Islam is a perfect religion, and they believe Islam was perfected in the time of the Prophet Muhammad, why do they need to go between the time of the Prophet Muhammad and when Sahih Bukhari and those 6 great personalities who compiled the different traditions of the Prophet Muhammad came? How did Muslims follow Islam? How did they follow Islam? And then there were some Muslims in the first 10 years of the Prophet's life. When the Quran was being revealed, there was no fasting. Prayer was observed by the Prophet Muhammad. Perhaps within the first 5 years, there were not 5 times prayers, but he would pray at night. Long before even prayer and tahajjud and so on were given, the Prophet Muhammad used to pray. And not only him alone, but the people with him. So that we find that the Quran gives us all this information to indicate it is a perfect book. And Allah is pleased, therefore, to give us this way of life. The final result of our efforts in developing ourselves with the attributes of Allah is what is called Islam. We attain peace. Peace with ourselves, peace with our fellow human beings, peace with our Creator. Because Islam is a religion of peace, not hostility. بارك الله لنا ولكم في القرآن العظيم ونفعنا وإياكم بالآيات والذكر الحكيم إنه تعالى جواد كريم ملك بر رؤوف رحيم. الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله. اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. اذكروا الله يذكركم وادعوه يستجب لكم وَلَذِكْرُ اللَّهِ أَعْلَى أكبر.